conversation. And he's getting higher attendance at his mob-ups than he is at his actual class. And it's an interesting model because most of these, by the way, are occurring between 10 and later at night. And they're usually occurring around an artifact. He's a science teacher, and so he'll have them meet at, a cesspool or meet at a delivery truck or the like. And it has, by the way, the other faculty quite annoyed because he's extending what the contract is for being a faculty member there. But the reality is that he's now deeply interested in getting an app for that. And I would argue that part of why this will become interesting is the idea that it is innately social. It tells me who I'm near. It tells me what I'm near. It tells me what's going on. I'll give you one app that I think is actually quite provocative, and I actually used this this past Friday night. There's one app that's out right now that if you go to a store, you can take a barcode scan of a UPC price code, on the side of a product. Anyone guess what it pops up when you take that code? Anyone guess? First of all, it pops up. Sir? Okay, first it does. It shows me that it knows where I am. All of the other stores near me, what are they charging for that item? Anyone want to guess the second thing it pops up? The reviews from the publications. And the third thing that pops up, it's social. The reviews from other people who have looked at that. And so I was out at Sears about to buy something, popped it up, and interestingly enough, they actually had the lowest price there. But I was totally prepared and quite enjoy going up to them and saying, I could walk, because it shows you how many feet till the lower element there. And being a Jewish kid from New York, this concept of digitally enabling haggling is just, it's an enormously exciting concept. Okay, it's a prosthetic. Think about it, It's a haggling prosthetic in that situation. Now, I'm not suggesting we're going to spend our life with our smartphone. You'll notice that all of the things I've talked about I don't want to spend my life looking at this. I actually want to spend most of my life having it in my pocket or in your purse or something like that. But I want to be able to pull it out to deepen that experience. And I can imagine, I'm sure you can imagine, that if you were teaching a class, either a fully online, a fully campus-based, or a blended class, what if you built an app? What if you could build around it the social dimensions of that? And then we get into some really interesting elements that we could add to it. You mentioned in my introduction that I'm very honored to serve on the board of First Robotics, started by Dean Kamen, the guy who invented the Segway and a number of other things, and the portable diabetes insulin pump. But what we've noticed is that competition is cool. That competition is cool. But that co-opetition with competition is also really interesting. But imagine literally if you had a group of students who were online students in a program who were part of a series of competitions that were occurring not just within their class, but all other courses that were taking place on that topic worldwide. Whether they were competing for dollars or virtual dollars or points or the like, it's a dramatic opportunity for us to leverage the good side of competition. The good side of even being able, by the way, which I have a friend who's looking at this right now, that you never finish a paper, that every student starts a paper and they keep going till it gets to be great. Even if it means along the way they're now borrowing from other students' papers as they read them, and that you start, because that's what we do in First Robotics, is that after the students lose, they get invited in to help improve the one that's winning. And imagine if we start to think about social assignments. Imagine if we start to view groups that are, I've done social learning for a long while. I was involved in the very first attempt to put email onto an aircraft carrier. And I flew to Rota, Spain, and worked with the Navy on this because their first effort at it failed. This was mainframe, profs-based email. And I got on board this, and if you've never been on an aircraft carrier, it's 5,000 people. It's a city. So we went to the first class, and I kind of thought about what I was going to do. And I said, I'm going to change a little bit. And I put every sailor into a group of 3. And I said, here's the deal. We're going to teach you email. It's really not that hard. But here's the deal. You all get the grade of the lowest person in your group of 3. So if that person gets an F, all 3 of you get an F. Okay, so you're now dependent on not only learning it, but getting the other folks there. And they start to argue, because these are sailors, this is going on their permanent record card. You know, they want to become admiral someday, and they're going to get screwed out because Joe didn't learn. I said, tough, okay? And I said, by the way, the test is in I think I did in 1.5 days from now. Here's some content. I'm not going to try to formally teach it to you, but I'm going to spend the entire time here if you need me. And I'm available 24 hours a day for the next day and a half. Anyone want to guess what went on on the ship during those? And luckily we were in port at the time in Spain. Okay? They worked throughout the night. They were working with each other. I got a call from the MPs at one point, the military police, and they said, Mr. Masie, I think you're going overboard. I said, why? They're trying to throw somebody overboard. There was one sailor who hadn't studied yet, and they were holding him over the rail. And, you know, and I said, well, keep him there a little while longer. He'll probably work. You know, the net effect was we trained the entire ship in about 4 weeks that way. Why? Because we combine traditional self-study with social learning and a social shared impact in that. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm really going to suggest to you is not, and I'm not up here to say that I think programs are going away or that, we're going to have a dramatic business model change. Some of those things may happen. There is a beginning and a middle and end to lots of programs. But what I do want to believe, and I want you to focus on, is that in many ways what we have been about, and many of you are friends I've known for many years, is a lot of the stuff that we did as innovation is going mainstream. A lot. I mean, I'm on a program at Wharton, University of Pennsylvania. It's a PhD program for people in the learning area. They get the equivalent of a business MBA and a PhD in education. And what is interesting is nowhere on it does it say that it's 50% online. When you register for it, it doesn't say 50% online. It just says, guess what? You'll go to campus for these times, very compressed times. You'll do this work online. You'll do this work independently with a mentor, because we've actually come mainstream in what we're about. But what we have to start to do is to think about what's next. And I would argue the first what's next in learning changes is that our learners are going to, in fact, use technology increasingly that's mobile, and are going to increasingly use technology that's social, and going to increasingly also use technology that has a performance support aspect to it. And particularly distance learners who may be working while they're learning are increasingly going to want integration between what they do in their jobs and what they do at work, and are increasingly going to want to apply and extend and contextualize what they're doing at work in their learning and what they're doing in learning in their workspace. I'm not saying books are going away. I'm not saying we're never going to read, but I'm saying the ability and the requirement that somebody has now and the opportunity to basically go and see video is going to be profound. Okay, and I think the level of video that we're looking at is different. The level of video is not going to be Hollywood-style video. In fact, there's a whole genre now of how. In fact, Jim and I were at a benefit of somebody who's building a online mystery show. Okay. In fact, what I talked to him later. I said, "How slick are you doing?" He said, "I can't do it very slick because if it's too slick, people won't trust it." So he's actually deliberately making it less slick, so it has a YouTube quality to it. That program that I talked about at Wharton, the very first thing we hand every student in the program is a flip cam. Why? because we asked them along the way to not only add video context to the papers that they're doing, to interview subject matter experts and other folks along the way, and we have an expectation, because it's an 18-month cycle program, that each cycle will create content to be used by the next cycle that we're doing. And we are building a repository of content there. Now, this requires a change in our own thinking, that as our learning expectations become more media-based, how do we integrate them with a canon of important work? And I'm not saying that books are going away, but we're going to see a canon of work integrated to that. I'll give you one element which we have to look at, which is metadata. A lot of you go, what is he talking about metadata? Give you a perfect example of what the problem is right now. All of the stuff that's flowing out of Iran right now is interesting. I wish that they had all turned on in their cell phones or in their cameras GPS metadata model on it, so that I could search it for something that happened yesterday, or I know that it happened in this city or that city. Because partially what starts to happen, as user content gets more and more and more, we're going to have to make it discoverable, and we're going to have to make it verifiable. Because one of the things that happens is anybody can end up shooting something, but is it real? Where did it happen? What's the context of it? And how do we even socially rate that? You know, how do we trust it? Because one of the elements in a thing is, as we move away from a canon, and we have lots and lots of user content, what's trustable in that? And by the way, Charmin's up front saying that they are the sponsors of the sit or squat site, because they want to tell you all that that's what they're in the business of, toilet paper and the like. But lots of social content now is coming from folks from an advertising perspective. A friend of mine is the head of social media for a huge advertising agency, where they are inserting content into YouTube as part of influencing consumer patterns and attitudes towards brand. So the whole idea of metadata and discoverability becomes an enormous one. One other thing that I think becomes intriguing as well is, and I use this to just share with you an interesting element of it. I just got back from India about 2 weeks ago, and I want to give you two data points from India. The role of the Internet Cafe as the university and madras of the world. That if you look at the Internet Cafe, and it was fascinating because one of the things I did when I was in India was, in addition to going to a wedding for an employee that I had never met before for 5 days, that was wonderful, and then meeting with lots of CEOs, I tried to get myself to as many Internet cafes as I could. And I would go in, and for a very small amount of money, I was suddenly in the midst of not only technology, but a culture. It was fascinating for me, for instance, what percentage of the people who were in those Internet cafes were taking online learning experiences, some of which they paid for, some of which they didn't. I went to one Internet cafe, and there were 13 young men cramped around one PC with a much larger monitor, the Internet Cafe got. Okay, they were all registered under one name with a university in England. Okay, they were collectively taking, I mean, talk about the impact on FTEs. Okay, they were sharing one registration, and they were all taking the course. And I said, well, what are you going to do at the end? And he said, well, we'll just put on our transcript that we were a group student for that, you know. And by the way, if they had a copy of it there, as Frank probably knows, it would probably be trusted in that sense, you know. But it was a fascinating element of looking at what happens there. My friends at the CIA will tell you that one of the most difficult things in terms of looking at counterterrorism is, how do you deal with somebody who has their entire computer on a stick drive, and literally when you plug it in, it's not booting the PC, but the whole computing process is happening there, and somebody's in an internet cafe for 7 minutes, and then they're gone. in that process. I was in one in which the number of people taking religious-focused learning was huge. And it was an interesting experience with that. But once